Today on CityLine, an in-depth report on homelessness in the Bay State, why the numbers are going up, and who is most affected by a life of displacement and distress. Hello everyone, welcome to CityLine. I'm Karen Holmes Ward. Today we focus on homelessness in Massachusetts. Until recently, the state's homeless population was comprised of primarily single adults, but the weakened economy has hit families hard. Today, more families are homeless in Massachusetts than ever before, and that means every night more children are being forced to sleep on the floors and couches of friends and relatives, live in motels, or stay in shelters. Call this the new generation of homelessness.
In March, President Obama addressed an issue rarely discussed in White House press conferences.
Kevin Chappelle. Hi, Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. President. A recent report found that as a result of the economic downturn, 1 in 50 children are now homeless in America. But what would you say to these families, especially children, who are sleeping under bridges in tents across the country?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that I'm heartbroken that any child in America is homeless. And the most important thing that I can do on their behalf is to make sure their parents have a job.
Today, more Americans are struggling with homelessness in conjunction with the weak economy. According to the National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty, nearly 3.5 million people will find themselves homeless this year. Over 1 million of them are children.
We've got to work very closely with the states to monitor and to help people who are still falling through the cracks. And the homeless problem was bad even when the economy was good. Part of the change in attitudes that I want to see here in Washington and all across the country is a belief that it is not acceptable for children and families to be without a roof over their heads in a country as wealthy as ours.
Here in Massachusetts, children are the fastest growing part of the homeless population. The National Study on Family Homelessness released a 2009 report that says about 17,500 children are homeless in the Bay State.
I became homeless in April 2006. My son was 2 years old. My daughter was not born yet.
25-year-old Alexis Lugo was evicted from her apartment in Brockton after she lost her job and couldn't pay rent.
At that time, I basically had nowhere to go.
So Lugo moved into a shelter.
Then I lasted there for a little while. I had my son, and it was hard, and those other kids, and I got pregnant with my daughter, and it was just bad. And then it was on for a while. I was in shelter.
My name is Jeffrey White. I'm 43 years old, originally from Trenton, New Jersey. I have a son. His name is Jeffrey Jr. Also, he's 4 years old. Right now, he's in daycare. He's been in daycare basically since he's been born. Got a real good bonding together. We're just trying to get a better life for each other.
In January, the Department of Transitional Assistance helped Jeffrey and his son, Jeffrey Jr., move into a shelter in Roxbury. Jeffrey had to quit his job as a cook in order to stay home with his son.
I came home when I got custody of Jeffrey. I had temporary custody of him. I was living I had a studio apartment where the apartment, under the rules, we couldn't have overnight guests. So I had to break my lease and, to keep him and move on. So basically we went down to DTA, and then they placed us in the hotel. And we were there 4 months, pretty much trying to find adequate housing for the both of us.
In recent months, Jeffrey found employment as a substance abuse relief worker, and Jeffrey Jr. now goes to daycare. But sometimes having a job just isn't enough. Finding adequate housing on a low-income budget is no easy task.
You put your head in, you put your head out.
Alexis and Jeffrey's stories are not unique. More families are struggling financially, meaning more children are feeling the effects.
Sometimes they wouldn't be hungry, they would just be tired. Yeah, if you think about it, yeah, they did do different things. They just wanted to be home. They didn't want to deal with other people sometimes. They didn't want people coming to our room, but that was just part of the deal.
Alexis was lucky. After a year and a half in the shelter, she got a job and moved to permanent housing. Her son Robert is now 5, and daughter Nialise is 2.5. Alexis hopes her children, Robert in particular, won't be haunted by the memories of homelessness.
But hopefully at the age that he is now, that he really doesn't remember any of that. So I'm just hoping and trying to push for at least to get through it so he doesn't have to repeat what I've been through. So I'm trying to get on my feet so he never has to go that route.
Jeffrey is still looking for a home. He hopes the difficult circumstances won't affect his son in the long run.
I think, at his age and right now, he's just happy to be with a family member, and as long as where I am, he'll be there and he's comfortable with that.
But homelessness can have major psychological effects on children. Sue Heilman is the executive director of Horizons for Homeless Children, a nonprofit organization based in Roxbury.
Homelessness actually creates often developmental delays in children because it's such a traumatic experience to lose one's home, that if children aren't given sort of the right kinds of attention, stimulation, nurturing activities to do while they're young particularly, then they actually don't grow and develop normally.
Studies show that children who experience homelessness are 4 times more likely to show delayed development and twice as likely to have learning disabilities.
If several years go by in the early years of life without the right amount of sort of attention and nurturing and stimulation, when they get ready to go to school, they're going to be way behind, and it's going to be really hard for them to be ready to read, which of course is so important, and write, and all of those skills that you need, pretty much by first grade. If you haven't had a good start, in those early years, it's going to be much harder, and there'll be much more money spent on specialists and attention to these children to try and catch them up. And the longer you wait, the harder it is and the more expensive it is.
That was Sangeeta Lee reporting. We interviewed Jeffrey White and Alexis Lugo this past spring. Since then, Jeffrey has been able to find permanent housing for himself and his son, Jeffrey Jr. Alexis and her family are also doing well. Her son is enrolled in public school, and her daughter has transitioned to a child care center close to the Lugos' home. Both families profiled in our story are still working to make sure their children can overcome such a difficult experience. When we come back, the toll that homelessness takes on a child's education and development. Welcome back. Imagine suddenly moving from your home to a place you have to share with strangers, sharing bunk beds in a tiny room that doesn't even belong to you. Imagine doing this while starting at a new school and making new friends. Homeless children deal with circumstances like this every day. There are programs in Massachusetts that help children cope. With so many homeless children these days, the call for help has never been greater.
Well, at first it was really scary because we was moved to summer